Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks, where we meet with the top thought leaders and strategists in TradFi, digital assets, technology, and financial planning. Joining me for this segment, we have Lena Haas, Head of Wealth Management Advice and Solutions at Edward Jones, Sonya Nolan, Senior Vice President of High Net Worth Solutions at Osaic, as well as Andrew Crowell, Vice Chairman of Wealth Management and Financial Advisor at D.A. Davidson. They join me to discuss what goes into a financial plan, the importance of communication, and planning for a transfer of wealth. And Lena, let's kick this off with you and talk about what goes into financial planning. It's not as simple as just, let's start with investments here and hope that we get some appreciation over the course of the plan.
Absolutely, and it's great to be here. So we like to start financial planning with really fulsome discovery to understand what matters to our clients and their families. And what we discovered that it's 4 key areas. It's personal purpose, health and well-being, spending time with family and loved ones, and then underlying all of that is the financial. So we have a full discovery process where we sit down with the families and we develop the plan that goes across the entire financial lives, talks about goals for the future, talks about the current needs, wants, and wishes, and also talks about wealth transfer across generations, because what we saw is that about half of Americans predict that they will get some sort of inheritance over the next 10 years. So this really affects every one of us.
Mm-hmm. And Sonya, both quantitative and qualitative information are inputs that are necessary to have an inclusive plan.
Yes, absolutely. We're, like Lena said, we're really looking at what are clients' goals and objectives. Obviously, we want to look at what are their financial assets and what is the financial makeup, including assets, liabilities, and sources of income. But we always want to include goals and objectives in our conversations with the client. Ultimately, the financial planning output is looking at things like retirement planning, tax planning, estate planning, risk mitigation. But that's all framed around the conversation around a client's goals and objectives. And oftentimes it might be even prioritizing those goals and objectives. So if a client is looking at, can I live my same lifestyle in retirement, and also wants to contribute to educational funding for their children or grandchildren, but also wants to transfer wealth to the next generation, sometimes it's having those conversations around what are the priorities around their goals and objectives. And that's the inputs we'll put into the plan to get to our outcomes and make those decisions around retirement planning, investments, estate planning, all of that.
Right. And Andrew, there's also risk mitigation that goes into the entire plan as well.
Excuse me. Absolutely. It's one thing to plan to save. It's another thing to find yourself in retirement unprotected, not sufficient insurance coverage, not sufficient protection for your family, for your assets. And so it's really critical on a regular basis to do a mitigation review and make sure that the coverage is still adequate, that it's still appropriate, and that the family has thought through in advance those issues that might come up that could threaten the family wealth that they've worked so hard to grow and steward over the years.
Right. And Andrew, you and I have covered this a number of times in the past, but the importance of communication, not simply just between the family members, but as the advisor counseling how family members should be approaching these types of delicate topics.
Life is fluid. It happens quickly and things change. People get diagnoses. There are births, there are deaths, there are divorces, there are marriages. There's lots of life milestones that can take place even just from one year to the next. And so we've found that at least annually, a family should be doing a comprehensive review of their financial plan. And sometimes even more frequently than that, if these other milestones have taken place in between times, just to make sure that the family's on track.
Yeah. And so you make an interesting point here that the attitudes likely differ between generations and how they feel about financial security and longevity.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's really important for an advisor to consider the whole family when thinking through their plan. So rather than focusing on the investment and planning considerations for one generation, if there is generational wealth, we want to make sure we're including those family members who will be impacted by that wealth. So an advisor can play an important role in that. They can be the person who's uncovering communication styles, behaviors, attitudes across the family, and also creating that framework for what that wealth will accomplish, whether it's going to benefit heirs, it's going to have a philanthropic impact, So advisor can really be the backbone to that conversation, and getting the family aligned so that when big changes in life do happen, like Andrew mentioned, the family's prepared in anticipation for those events. And there's also been some alignment and framework for what that wealth will accomplish. And hopefully that will encourage the next generation to be good stewards of that wealth as well.
Right. And Lena,
No,
you
Sonia,
mentioned, I'm sorry, go
I was
ahead.
going to say that what's interesting is that when it comes to wealth transfer specifically, it can be such an emotional point for a lot of clients. They're associated with death. It's so very complex. But at the same time, exactly, Sonia, to what you were saying, almost 60% of our clients said that having a financial advisor is really, really helpful to making sure that emotion is taken out of the conversation and you're really planning for all contingencies in life.
Right. And Lena, that was exactly the question I was going to direct towards you, that you can't just simply talk about these types of issues once it becomes an urgent issue, right? You need to, financial planning, the key word in there is plan, right? So, you can't think about this as something dramatic has happened and then, okay, what do we do? It's not, you just don't flip a switch and a financial plan is in place. I mean, you can't wait until there's an event.
It's never urgent until it is, right? What we saw is that almost 2/3 of clients and their families are not having the conversation about wealth transfer. And what that results is potentially in just confusion and hurt when it's too late. Whereas we know that when there is a developed plan, what children feel and is gratitude and appreciation, and what the givers feel is that their legacy is understood and respected.
Mm-hmm. Well, Sonya, let's talk more about this when it comes to figuring out what this transfer of wealth is going to look like. What are some of the options you have? Do you necessarily have to pass along to the next generation, or can you just take the philanthropic route? Can it be a combination of multiple ways to pass on wealth?
Well, it's always a nice option to have if you have wealth transfer to the next generation. That's what we want to help our clients accomplish. But I would say that, to simplify it for clients, we often say that if you have wealth left over after your lifetime, there's 3 places it can go. It can go to your intended heirs, it can go to a charitable cause, or it can go to the government. And so we want to help clients align that. It's not quite as simple as that. There's more nuance to it. Do you give during lifetime? Oftentimes when clients acquire more wealth and have significant wealth, we do utilize lifetime gifting as a strategy, for example. But then do they have charitable causes that they want to impact in some meaningful way? And do we look at having an entity or structure in which there's both individual beneficiaries and charitable beneficiaries? So, the gifting and the transfer of wealth can happen during lifetime. It can happen at death. And there can be different beneficiaries, but that's part of the planning process, is understanding where the client is in their accumulation of wealth and what they want to accomplish, and how do we balance that out in a way that really has the impact that they intend.
Right. And Andrew, it's not simply just assets that have been acquired over one's lifetime. You can also have possessions that have been acquired. So you also want to make sure that, acquisition and when things have been disposed, or how that accounting takes place as well.
Absolutely. And we have seen this, for example, with families that have collections, maybe a collection of art, maybe a collection of China dolls, maybe a collection of China. It could be anything. And we know that preferences, values, tastes change from one generation to the next. So we encourage families to talk about, their collections. It might be baseball cards, but somebody has stewarded that collection along for years, maybe multiple generations. What do we want to happen to that collection? It could be that the next generation has no interest, but it could be a perfect donation to a local museum or to a university or something like that, or to an auction house if it's China or other collectibles. And we find sometimes that families haven't even talked about those critical things, and yet at the end of the day, when somebody has passed and people are emotional and they're sitting around in the dearly departed's home and they're looking at all these possessions, gosh, having had a conversation in advance about where the art collection goes, or which family member likes which art piece best, or what have you, it could just avoid a lot of speed bumps down the road if families proactively engage in these conversations.
Lena, you brought up an interesting point in your notes about incentivizing behaviors. What do you mean by that?
Well, so when we were listening to our clients talk about wealth transfer, they don't talk just about assets or dollars and cents. A lot of it is like, what do we as a family stand for? What are our attitudes towards money? What are our attitudes towards life? We see that it is so important to talk about all of these attributes so that you know that when there is wealth transfer, the children, for instance, the receivers, know how to take that on responsibly. And then we also see that the nature of wealth transfer is changing, because a lot of the givers of older adults, they are choosing to give while living, or maybe they're choosing to skip a generation if the kids are well off and go directly to grandchildren. And so in this, it's so important to, one, like, be really transparent. This is what I'm doing. I want you guys to enjoy family trips while I'm alive together with me. And I want you to spend time together with us. And I want to pay for my granddaughter's education, right? So talking about the reasons is really, really important to that full understanding, and then to incentivizing the right behaviors.
Right. And Sonya, I think at the end of the day, this all comes down to, it's not a one size fits all solution or a black box for everyone when it comes to financial planning. Do you also work with a network of, let's call it, accountants, estate planners, lawyers to help families map this out?
Yeah, absolutely. We always say financial planning is really a team sport. And while we can follow a process for each of our clients, each client situation is going to be customized and unique. And so when we are thinking about other professionals that we want to collaborate with, we do want to think about estate planning attorneys, accountants. They're integral to actually implementing the plan that we're helping our clients to create. So working with a network of professionals that are trusted. But beyond that, it's also ensuring that these professionals have the skill set and the capabilities of serving the client wherever they are at in their evolution of the wealth that they've created. So, as we go up market, we do see more complexities to the plan. And so making sure that we're engaging with the right professionals who work with that type of client and can implement the right types of planning strategies is crucial as well.
Right. Andrew, is there the flexibility to revise plans or update plans as life events happen, whether wealth's acquired or lost, family members enter or exit the family? Is there flexibility for something that's as complex as this?
There is, and it's critical that happen. Life, as I said at the beginning, is very fluid and change happens quickly. The number of times we've seen that clients not even revise the beneficiary on an IRA account, and it's an ex-spouse, or it could be a grandchild that is no longer alive. I mean, things happen. And so having a regular checkup, at least on an annual basis, to lift the hood and ask all those important questions about, are these charities still important to you? Have you checked them on Charity Navigator to make sure they're still solvent and they're rated highly, that they're not absconding with funds? All these types of things are really, really critical, because the best laid plans without a regular review, sometimes you can find yourself having made big mistakes just because you didn't take the time to refresh. One more thing I would say in that regard, I just recently updated all of my estate documents, and I did not realize that the new best practice has identification of digital assets as something that courts, you want to expressly state that your beneficiaries or heirs or executor have access to your digital accounts. With two-factor authentication, if somebody doesn't know the passcode on your iPhone or your smartphone, and they try to log into your bank account and they find, I can't even do the two-factor authentication because I don't have access to these digital assets. That was a new thing for me, and I work in the business, but that was something that a regular update of the plans, state documents, and healthcare directives, it's just really, really important, Jill.
Yeah. Lena, are you finding that perhaps it's younger generations that are more open to having these kinds of conversations, or is there progress being made there?
Yes, and I would say that the way that we're seeing the progress made is really engaging in that overall, and Andrew, to your point, regular financial planning, and then ensuring that advisors are bringing the right members across generations to the table, and then it's natural and essential part of the comprehensive plan. And what I would say is that having that regular planning conversation and wealth transfer component is really critical to managing the family harmony, managing uncertainty, and overall financial complexity of passing wealth.
Right. Well, actually, Sonya, let's wrap up with this and take a step back for a moment. When do you start executing on a financial plan? Is it when you buy a home, when you have kids, when you get out of school? What's the ideal time to start?
I would say all of those milestones are times where you might want to visit doing a plan if you haven't done it already. I would say if we can do the planning in anticipation of those events, that's even better, because sometimes those events require planning in advance, like thinking about a client who's selling their business. If we can do the planning ahead of the sale of the business, we might be able to accomplish estate planning objectives, tax mitigation strategies. So we really want to get ahead of some of those events. And when those events are known, getting ahead of them is important and can be done. Sometimes, as Andrew and Lena mentioned, life comes at us quickly, and we don't always have the foresight to be able to do the planning we want to do ahead of that. But I think engaging with your clients on a regular basis, having those conversations regularly, and making sure planning is incorporated into every conversation and meeting you have with the client can help you avoid some of those catastrophic or devastating events that you feel unprepared for.
All right, we appreciate everyone's insight. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.
Thank you.